This is Fothentic History.
Hello and welcome to the podcast. I'm Brian Young.
And I'm Holly Fry.
Holly.
Yeah.
Today we're gonna do a bit of a travelogue, and we're gonna look at a number of major systems across the galaxy, and just give a bit of an overview about each one of them. But in a galaxy with thousands of habitable star systems, there's no way we'll get to them all, and we know more about some than we do others, so we'll definitely be all over the place. But do you have a favorite planet in the galaxy, Holly?
My favorite place in the galaxy is not a planet. It is Bespin. But of planets, I think Naboo and Kamino are the two top contenders for me.
Why Kamino? I mean, Naboo I can get behind.
You know, I like a humid climate.
Yeah.
I think it's beautiful. I think the Kaminoans are fascinating, and they're technologically so advanced that I think there's a lot to be learned there.
Yeah.
That's why.
Oh. Well, that's a perfectly acceptable answer. But my favorite planet in the galaxy is Naboo, and I thought we'd start there. So do you want to kick it off?
That sounds perfect. Located on the border of the Mid-Rim territories, almost on the edge of the Outer Rim, Naboo was a lush pastoral planet with deep oceans. It was home to two sentient species, the Gungans, whose capital was Otogunga, and the Naboo, whose capital was on the other side of the planet, and that capital was called Theed.
Naboo was a rarity among planets and an enigma to astrophysicists, as it didn't have a core of molten magma, but of plasma. And this was used as a power source around the planet and was the secret of Gungan shield and weapon technology.
As for the fauna of Naboo, there was a really interesting dichotomy at play. The land animals were all pretty docile, from shaks to fambas to pico-picos and nunas. Most of these animals, at least in the wild, grazed on the fertile grasslands of Naboo, and there were very few natural predators. Below, in the water, on the other hand, completely different story. There were monstrous and giant aquatic creatures like the Sando aqua monster, the OPC killer, and the Kolo clawfish, which became a highly sought-after delicacy.
So it makes sense when you think of the development of the surface and aquatic societies, where the Naboo had no predators to contend with and had no army, and the weapons they had were common across the galaxy and easily obtainable by trade. Their space navy was full of gorgeous, handcrafted ships. The Gungans, on the other hand, developed many defensive technologies and were very capable warriors, owing to a past of scrapping in the dangers of Naboo's oceans.
Yeah, there's definitely, when you look at it, you kind of get a sense that the Naboo military was almost ornamental.
Yeah, they were very much like, I've got a paintbrush.
Yeah, everything is designed super beautifully, but you have to wonder how well it would hold up under real, actual stress.
Yeah.
Naboo thrived during the Galactic War, as the Emperor hailed from that planet. Though after his passing, he gave an order to his faithful to execute an operation called Cinder, and it called for the destruction of Naboo. But fortunately, Leia Organa and a contingent of the Rebel Alliance were on hand to prevent that destruction.
If you're interested in getting into more detail on Naboo, we did a more in-depth look at both the government and inner workings of Naboo in our two-part episode about the Battle of Naboo from about 10 years before the start of the Clone Wars, so you can look for that in our archives.
And now we're hopping into a planet that is another one that would be high on my list of favorites, and that is Coruscant. That same Emperor, Palpatine, that was from Naboo, ruled from Coruscant, which was the center of the Republic for many, many years. The entire planet was one giant city, with buildings thousands of stories high. There were very few natural parks on the planet, and those that did exist were in high demand.
Coruscant was a center of trade, culture, arts, and industry for the galaxy. As the capital, it was located in the Core Worlds region. It's believed that humans in the galaxy originated on Coruscant, but they quickly spread to all corners once they'd achieved light speed travel.
At alternating times, it served as the headquarters for the Jedi Order and the Sith Empire. It also housed a galactic senate until the Galactic Civil War. And after the defeat of the Empire, a new republic was established. But instead of relocating the newly created Senate in its former home, Chandrila was established as a new temporary home.
Yeah, it was really interesting. After the New Republic took over, instead of picking one planet and saying, this is the capital of the galaxy, it would rotate, so each of the planets would take turns, which worked out for everybody until Hosnian Prime.
Yeah, that was unfortunate. It does, really, to me, it's always represented such a big shift in terms of saying, like, let's stop doing those things over and over that kind of got us into these messes.
Yeah.
But yeah, even so, it was not able to protect everyone from incoming attack.
Yeah. So, on Coruscant, a criminal underworld thrived on the lower levels of the planet. Level 1313 and the surrounding levels were particularly notorious, havens for criminals, bounty hunters, and all other sorts of lowlifes. Coruscant had a thriving blue-collar population as well that worked in service to the upper crust of the planet, as well as industrial areas. So, yeah, there was this really interesting dichotomy of everything ranging from poverty to ridiculous wealth on Coruscant.
Yeah, I feel like when I say, like, I would love Coruscant, I probably would be terrified, and I would want only the fancy pants unicorn parts of it. Like, I want to be one of the people that gets to go to the park. I mean, yeah, and then I would be super scared everywhere else. Like, I don't mind a little a little wildness, but because places like 1313 were so notoriously dangerous, I think I would probably be a wuss, unfortunately. Because
Unless
you have to be
had
very...
an armed escort, or were a Jedi.
Right. Well, you have to be super savvy on a planet like that. Like, I'm all for exploring all kinds of different places, but I feel like on a planet like that, if I just got dropped in, I would be like the stupid yokel that gets themselves in trouble because I trust some totally incorrect person.
Yeah.
It gets in all kinds of mess.
Actually,
like, there were probably also a lot of really lovely and amazing people that were not fortunate enough to live the life of luxury that parts of Coruscant afforded. But getting to them, I think, would involve having to be smarter than I am.
Where do you think you'd have a harder time assimilating and exploring, Coruscant or Cantonica? That seems like a tough one.
It does. I feel like I could probably manage Cantonica better, just because Coruscant is so dense, right?
Yeah.
Like, with Cantonica, you kind of know
there's like one settlement.
More cleanly, right. It's not quite as much to manage and learn about before you go. What about you?
I think I'd probably do better on Coruscant because at least there would be some good people there.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
Someone could help me and take pity on me where I don't think that would happen at Canto Bight.
See, I think I would think someone was helping me and taking pity on me, and then I would be in deep, deep trouble in like 12 seconds. It'd be like, we're going to take care of you, and then we're going to cut you up and feed you to people.
All of a sudden, your organs are on the black market.
I went real dark, but that is my concern about Coruscant. We're going to move on from that, though, and talk about a little desert planet. Located on the Outer Rim, Tatooine was an important planet, even if it wasn't really often talked about. It was referred to as the planet furthest from the bright center of the universe. And for many years, the local control was in the hands of the Hutt criminal syndicate. And if you want to learn more about the Hutts, we've got you covered. You can refer back to our episode on the criminal underworld in the galaxy.
So Tatooine was an arid planet full of sand and rocky vistas that baked beneath the heat of binary suns. The planet was home to two indigenous sentient species, the Tuskens and the Jawas. For many years, they were the only inhabitants of the planet until galactic mining interests swarmed the planet and an influx of humans and other species arrived.
After the mining interests left, it seems as though the Hutts were really the last ones standing in terms of control. And those that were too poor to leave just simply stayed. And since Tatooine wasn't in the Republic, this allowed for all kinds of criminal enterprises to flourish, including, unfortunately, the practice of slavery.
As far as the native species of animals on the planet, the largest were krayt dragons, large carnivorous monsters that had distinctive calls and would swim through the sand dunes of the planet. Banthas and dewbacks and eops were were common among the planet as pack animals and mounts. Rontos, womp rats, mastiffs, and scurriers were also common sights. It was even home to a sarlacc in the Great Pit of Carcoon.
The major cities of Tatooine included Mos Eisley, which was a haven for criminals, pilots, smugglers, and bounty hunters looking for work, and Mos Espa, home of the Boonta Eve Classic pod race. We also did an entire episode on that pod race, so if you're interested in learning more about it, go check that out.
So we're going to move to the Mid-Rim now for our next planet, and that's to visit Kashyyyk, the Roshar tree-covered home of the Wookiees. This planet was a temperate jungle that circled a single sun and was a key planet in the Republic and during the Galactic Civil War. It had 3 moons that orbited it, and it was a major navigational point in galactic hyperspace routes.
Its main cities, including Chihirho, were built into the massive trees of Kashyyyk. Other notable features included Mount Ariyakyak, which was an orchard that provided shishak fruit to the Wookiees, but was defoliated by a black mold by the Empire during the Dark Times. Another notable feature was the Black Forest that the Wookiees actually believed was haunted.
During the Dark Times, the Empire enslaved many Wookiees to be pressed into service across the galaxy, and they weren't liberated until well after the battles of Endor and Jakku. Though there were attempts at revolt that led to mass exterminations of Wookiees on the planet. The Empire even stopped referring to it as Kashyyyk, instead designating it only as G5623.
I feel like that's sort of the standard dehumanization playbook, right? Like, we won't even acknowledge that this was a culture anymore.
Here's a number.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it is. It's really disturbing. We're going to take leave of Kashyyyk, though, and fly out next to the expansion region of the galaxy, to the planet of Mimban. And Mimban was a foggy, mud-filled swamp that was home to several intelligent species, most notably the Mimbanese.
War wasn't anything new to the Mimbanese. Rich in hyperbarite mineral deposits, the planet found itself in the crosshairs of the Separatist Alliance during the Clone Wars, with the Grand Army of the Republic's 224th Division coming to their aid and earning the nickname Mud Jumpers.
It must have been both confusing and frustrating for the Mimbanese Liberation Army to have been defended by the 224th in the Clone Wars, only to then have that same division of mudjumpers return during the time of the Empire in order to subjugate the planet for its resources.
The next one we're going to talk about Vandor 1, more often referred to as just Vandor. This was a frigid world in the Mid-Rim with very few sparse settlements. The Empire had facilities on the planet connected to each other by an elaborate rail system through the snowy mountain passes.
One of the most notorious village settlements was Fort Ipso, built into the sides of the mountain peaks. And this was a haven for gamblers and droid fighting, all of the usual kinds of things that you might expect to find in a wild frontier settlement.
Moving back to the Outer Rim, we visit Lothal, which was one of the first planets liberated from the rule of the Empire in the waning days of their control of the galaxy. Lothal was an agrarian, mining, and industrial planet that featured huge flowing fields and unique rock formations. Before Imperial rule, the planet was covered in spine tree forests, but those were leveled.
Lothal was home mainly to humans, but many of the common species of the galaxy, including Rhodians, Ithorians, and many others, also lived there. Capital City was the center of civic life on the planet, where an elected governor led their government until the Empire installed their own agent in that post.
The planet was home to a number of native animal species that had very common names. Loth cats, Loth rats, and Loth bats were ubiquitous wildlife around the planet. Loth wolves had long been thought to be extinct, but made a resurgence in the final days of Imperial rule on the planet.
Gravball was a popular sport among the inhabitants of Lothal. Winter was the season of Gravball, and several schools around the planet fielded teams for this crowd-pleasing sport. One particularly beloved Gravball team was the Apsai Sabercats.
Lothal was a breeding ground for rebel activity as well. The Spectre crew got their real start there and became Phoenix Squadron in the Alliance to restore the Republic. The Empire had facilities on the planet that they used to practically enslave the population to mine resources and build TIE defenders in an experimental program. It got so bad that shanty towns of poor workers sprouted up, including one that locals referred to as Tarkin Town, after Grand Moff Wilhuff Tarkin and sort of stories of his cruelty. This town was actually eventually burnt down by the Empire in a bid to lure out the Spectre crew.
Lothal was also home to a mysterious Jedi temple that had stood for many years and remained a secret for many years after the Empire's occupation, although they did eventually find it. After the Empire meddled with it, though, it completely vanished under really mysterious circumstances.
After the Imperial Star Destroyer Chimera, led by Grand Admiral Thrawn, bombarded the planet, and that Star Destroyer was dragged forcibly from the system by spacefaring Purrgils, the revolt against the Empire was in full force, and the Empire lacked the resources to take the planet back before losing the war elsewhere.
Moving on, we're going to another planet where a lot of interesting and sort of scary things happened. Known to some as the place where Jedi go to die, the volcanic planet of Mustafar was located in the Outer Rim. Mustafar was covered in magmatic rivers that made it particularly inhospitable to all but the most hardy of species without significant protective gear or shielding technology.
Native Mustafarians lived in underground caves that were created by lava fleas, but they were divided into two distinct subspecies. The northern Mustafarians were tall, slender beings that rode on the lava fleas and were more often than not guards. The southern Mustafarians were shorter and stouter and performed the heavy labor of extracting the minerals and ores required for the livelihood of their planet from the lava flows.
Because of its unique properties, there were a lot of valuable minerals and ores that could be taken from the planet, and even from the lava flows themselves, just as Brian mentioned. In the days before the Clone Wars, it was exploited by the Techno-Union Army, and it became aligned with the Confederacy of Independent Systems when the war broke out.
Due to its remote location, this is where General Grievous opted to hide Separatist leadership in the last days of the war, but that didn't matter. Darth Vader arrived and murdered them all, and the planet fell in line with the control of the New Galactic Empire as the Clone Wars came to an end.
According to Emperor Sheev Palpatine, Mustafar was a locus of the dark side of the Force, and that is partially thought to be the reason that Darth Vader chose that planet for his castle home. His status there and ability to torture captured Jedi is what really gained Mustafar the reputation as the place where Jedi go to die.
Yeah, so we're going to leave that grim note and move back to we're going to move to another planet in the Outer Rim territories that got quite a bit of attention during the Clone Wars, and that was Christophsis. Christophsis had a crystalline structure that made it attractive to the competing military forces of the galaxy. And Christophsis was a target of the Empire during the Galactic Civil War, as kyber crystals were known to grow there.
If you're interested in the Clone Wars battle that took place on Christophsis, we did once again a full episode on the Battle of Christophsis, and that is also easily findable in our archive.
So we don't have a lot of records about what Christophsis is like outside of the battles from the historical record, but we do know a bit about one native species of creature, force-sensitive creatures known as Kiadax. They were insectoid in nature, had multiple heads and eyes, and had saw-blade limbs that made sounds like their name as they roved through the crystal forests.
And next we are going to go to another planet that was heavily populated, and that is Corellia. It was located in the Core Worlds territory. And this planet was famed throughout the galaxy for its shipbuilding and its industrial center. And during the time of the Galactic Empire, it was used as a manufacturing site of Star Destroyers and TIE Fighters. It was also the site of companies like Sinar and the Corellian Engineering Corporation. You'll also hear that abbreviated as CEC, which built the Corellian YT series there.
The planet had plentiful water and land masses connected by massive ribbons of speeder tracks. Coronet City was a hub of intergalactic travel for those who could get there. There were many rat-like creatures that lived in the cities and sewers of Corellia, and Corellian hounds were prized for their abilities as bloodhounds.
Given the poor blue-collar industrial nature of the planet, orphans often found their way into criminal organizations like the White Worms, led by Lady Proxima, or in even worse places like the Silo in the Bottoms. Criminal enterprises operating on Corellia during the Galactic Civil War included the droid Gotra and the Caldana Syndicate.
Prior to the Empire, Corellia was ruled by the Corporate Sector Authority, though they became civilian enforcers for the Empire during their rule.
The last major planet that we're going to talk about today is also known as the Junkyard, and that is Jakku. And Jakku was a remote, barely populated desert planet in the western reaches inside the inner rim of the galaxy.
Major features of the planet include sand, sinking fields of sand, and more sand. It was once a lush and verdant world, but a calamity struck it that turned it into a barren desert wasteland. It's home to a number of species that thrived in the desert, though, including hapabores, nightwatcher worms, lugabeasts, skitter mice, and steel peckers. Steel peckers are super interesting in that they were birds that evolved to eat the mechanical waste of the planet.
That's one of those like evolutionarily fascinating species. They just completely like a treasure trove for biologists to study. Jakku was the site of a secret weapons manufacturing facility for the Empire. It was also the site of their last stand against the Alliance to restore the Republic about a year after the Battle of Endor. The wreckage from that battle became one of the major features of the planet, and that is why it's called the Junkyard. Scavengers made their livings scavenging bits from the all-out battle.
Nema Outpost was the largest outpost on Jakku, and when I say largest, don't assume that means actually large. It was the largest outpost on Jakku, which doesn't mean a whole lot, and it appeared to be little more than a tent city. By the time of the conflict between the First Order and the Resistance, Unkar Plutt ran the town as its largest businessman, but Constable Zuvio, a Cuso, enforced the law, and this was a major trading post for the junk that was collected.
We wanted to touch on a couple of other planets and mention them here, and those are Dathomir, Endor, and Alderaan. And we did episodes that touch on these three planets. Those are all in our archives. You can go ahead and check those out anytime. They're a way deeper dive than any of the discussions we're having about planets here today. The first one is about the lost culture of Alderaan, which explains a lot of what we lost when that planet was destroyed by the Empire.
Then we had episodes on Mother Talzin and Darth Maul, and both had ties to Dathomir, and both episodes got into the background of that planet. Then we did an entire episode about the Ewok Princess Nisa, and that has a lot of information about her life in the Bright Tree Village on Endor.
Yeah, I'm hoping to revisit some of Nisa's adventures and do another episode talking about other things that happened to her in her life. But for now, that is it for our brief tour around the galaxy.
Hey, Holly, guess what?
What?
I've got some mail.
Woo! Bring it on.
So, this mail's from a reader, or a listener. It says, "Hi, Brian and Holly. I am currently a third-year Hogwarts student, and I go to school with Albus Potter. I'm a huge fan of authentic history and full of Sith. I had to smuggle my MP3 player into Hogwarts. Needless to say, I'm a Muggle-born, and was wondering, weren't all wizard families Muggles at one time until magic surfaced, and they started organizing with other wizards? Anyway, I just wanted to say your music is fantastique. There's a French elective at Hogwarts. And thanks for making a show that shows wizards like me movies and books I'd normally not ever have heard of. P.S. There's been some weird stuff going on at the school with Albus Potter and his friend Scorpius. Weird, like time travel weird, so maybe that could be a show one day. Anyway, thanks for the good work. Goodbye." So, thank you. Thank you for your letter. It's always good to hear from other parts of the galaxy.
For sure.
And
I have to say, I feel like we get more communications from Hogwarts students than almost anywhere else. They're very communicative and good at writing.
I think it might have something to do with the forbidden nature of what they're doing in the first place. Like, they're in this magical place where Muggle technology is forbidden, and they're listening to a podcast, which is sort of, sadly, the pinnacle of human technology, Muggle technology.
Right.
And then they want to have some sort of acknowledgement of that, so they write to us about it. So I'm glad that we're probably the most listened to podcast at Hogwarts, though.
I am too, but I don't want to get anybody in trouble.
It's true.
So be careful when you listen.
So if you want to send us letters, we'd love to hear from them. particularly if you're from Hogwarts, because why not? If you'd like to do that, you just need to email us by going to fothentichistory.com and using the contact form there. And on that website as well, you can find all of our back episodes in the archives. Especially, it was funny as I was writing this episode, I didn't realize how many previous episodes we'd done that could refer back to things.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of one of those great things when you study history, you start to see how everything clicks together. And so it builds your puzzle starts to become a little more obvious as more and more pieces get added.
Yeah.
So I think we've reached that point where in some cases, particularly when you're doing sort of a generalized survey like this episode is, it's pretty easy to start attaching it to other pieces and getting a sort of richer groundwork.
Yeah. So where can people find you, Holly?
I'm on Twitter as Surliest Girl, and I'm on Instagram as SurlyGirly5. You can find my regular history podcast, Stuff You Missed in History Class, at missedinhistory.com or as Missed in History on social media. I also do a podcast about animation called Drawn, and that is drawnpodcast.com, and it is the same Drawn Podcast on social media. What about you?
We do a show together that people may have heard about. We do. Other than this one called Full of Sith, and it's all about Star Wars. So I'm guessing if you're listening to this, you're going to like that show. And you can also find my writing at, or forget all of that. You can find it all collated for you on Twitter, which is at Swankmatron, is where to follow me. Or you can find me at swankmatron.com and send messages to me that way. But you can find my writings, in other words, at StarWars.com/film, Stuff You Missed, or not Stuff You Missed, HowStuffWorks.com. In my head, Holly, How Stuff Works is the Stuff You Missed in History class place. And where else? BigShinyRobot.com. I'm all over the place. As for Fothentic History, you can find us at FothentichHistory.com. Like we said, check out the back episodes. The archive is chock full of delicious information like this, and really interesting dives into other parts of history across the galaxy and in other universes. And with, you can listen to us on iTunes, Stitcher, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like this, feel free to drop us a review. We'd really appreciate that. So, unless you've got anything else, Holly.
I do not.
Well then, until next time.